Hey, listeners, and welcome to the You Are Epic podcast. This is where we honor the people who've helped build not just our industry, but our communities. I'm Angela Hucker, and I am so glad that you're here. So, I'm taking the time to sit down with people who've been in construction for years, people who've been through the ups, the downs, and everything in between. You're going to hear real stories of resilience, growth, and moments that shaped who they are. This podcast is for those that want to learn more from people who've been walking this path for some time, and they're helping to lift up others and quietly making a difference along the way. It's also to show you that your journey matters and your voice matters. And in case you've forgotten, you are epic. Let's get into it. So today's guest is Prue Harper, who is an absolute powerhouse recruiter with extensive experience across both white collar and blue collar roles in industries like oil and gas, mining, renewables, and power. She's managed everything from project kickoffs to mobilizations and even helped deliver a team of welders with a near flawless repair rate on the massive Itchies project in Darwin. After moving to Australia in 2010, Prue earned her master's in business with a focus on HR from Notre Dame. She's passionate about people, thrives on challenges, and has even helped shape the mental health strategy for a tier one company. Prue brings heart, hustle, and heaps of insight, and I'm so excited to talk to her today. Thank you for joining us, Prue.
Ange, thank you for having me. It's an
Oh, it's
absolute pleasure.
such an honor, such an honor. So, Prue, what we might do is just start with, how long you've actually worked in the industry and how did you get started?
Thank you. So I actually arrived in Australia in 2010, completed my master's degree, and it was really difficult trying to get into any industry in Australia after I completed my degree because I was overqualified or didn't have enough WA experience. So I was applying for a range of different roles. And then I got into one of the major companies in Australia, in Perth. I took a job as a receptionist just so that I could get my foot in the door. Once I was in the door, I had taken off my degrees and everything off my resume because I just couldn't find work. So once I was in the door, I had taken a short-term role. The recruitment manager found out that I had previous recruitment experience coming from South Africa. So although I had worked in a bank in South Africa, I also had my own business. So I was one of 7 directors. So we had a massive construction business in South Africa. We worked on roads, etc. It was civil work. So I had been involved in that business for a number of years before coming to Australia. And so she found out that, I had recruitment experience, HR experience, and she saw that I had a degree, a master's degree from Notre Dame. And she said, now I need you in my team. So she pulled me into the recruitment team. And obviously, starting off in a new company, in a new country, I started off as an admin. And it wasn't long before I was recruiting. So my first major project I recruited for was Jimble Bar. Then it just took off from there. And I've recruited all trades, blue collar, white collar, and everything from a trade assistant to a Peggy up to welders and electricians, the most difficult ones to recruit for, and also up to construction managers, HSC, admin staff. So I've done actually every role you can think of in recruitment.
Yeah, and and I know with some of the projects that you worked on, particularly the Itchies project, which is where we met as well, because we were
Yes.
both working there. Like those range of roles, there's the remit from trade assistant right up to construction manager. There's, obviously understanding a different set of skills for each of those roles as well, and trying to find
Absolutely.
the right people to match those skills. So it's
Yes.
quite diverse. So
Yes, it is actually. And I think when I first started, I preferred blue collar. So I worked mainly in blue collar, but then slowly moved into white collar roles, just to get a bit of diversity and a change, because doing just one like blue collar only was becoming I could do it with my eyes closed, so I needed a challenge, so I went into white collar as well, and started doing white collar roles, which really challenged me. Yeah, but it was amazing, and I still enjoy doing both.
What sort of challenges did you find with the white collars?
With white collar, the main challenge is getting right to the end of the recruitment process with them, and then another company offers them more money, and then they pull out, and then you've got to start the whole process again, trying to find the right candidate for that role. Whereas with blue collar, you have 10 people, sometimes 20, applying for one role. So if somebody pulls out, you've got somebody waiting to fill that spot. So that's the main challenge with white collar.
Is that something that you found that's quite common with white collars because there's not as much skills available with those white collar roles?
Absolutely, yes. And also the problem is having to only recruit in WA. There would be a suitable person somewhere in Australia, or New Zealand, or in any other country. You'd find people applying from the UK, because when you put out a job, people apply from all over the world, because they see that job on Seek, obviously, or Indeed, and they apply from all over the world. But you only can recruit from one state, which makes it extremely difficult. It's easier if you're able to go out to other states, and recruit from other states, but a lot of the companies are not doing that anymore. So it just makes it a bit harder when it comes to recruiting, especially white collar roles.
So what's the reason that companies aren't broadening their horizons?
Think it's mainly having to pay for flights from other states. Some companies will say, yes, we will do it if the candidate is prepared to pay for their own flight. And 90% of the candidates will say, no, you need me, you need to pay for my flight. I'm not paying for the flight. But you will find that there are guys who are desperate and are wanting, work. They will take that role and pay for their own flights.
So has there been any shift with that post-COVID with the hybrid work arrangements?
Yes, the main shift came with recruiting from over East during COVID, because obviously they wouldn't fly, all the borders were closed and that kind of thing. So we couldn't fly people from interstate. But then also they're still looking for people, to go into the office, even though there's the hybrid way of working. A lot of companies are now pushing people to go back into the office full time.
Mm. And so how is that kind of having an impact with being able to find candidates?
Because a lot of candidates have been working hybrid and been working from home, you'll find that if companies are not offering that hybrid way of working, people are refusing, they're turning down the jobs.
Yeah.
So we're finding that's happening a lot.
So that's been a noticeable shift, like post-COVID, with, people now
Absolutely.
seeking that hybrid work arrangement
Yes.
as well. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, because if you think about it, any job can be done from anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
but I think it's just shifting mindset. You'll
Yeah.
find that a lot of the older males are wanting people in the offices, whereas the females tend to be more open to the hybrid working arrangements. You'll find that, if there's females in management roles, they're happy with you working from home a few days a week and a few days in the office. Whereas a lot of the older males that are in those senior roles are refusing. They want to see faces in the offices every day.
And this is a big thing, especially in the industry, because a lot of the senior roles are held by males as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that then I can see how that could then cause a disconnect with being able to source people. But it's interesting that you said about that with shifting the mindset. So what kind of, from your perspective with, doing the recruitment at all levels with blue and white collars, what kind of things could help shift those mindsets?
Educating them, that certain roles, engineers, for instance, recruiters, admin staff, they don't need to be in the office. So it's about educating and working with the older males to try and get them to understand that, people can work from home and get their job and get the job done. And obviously, if they're not doing the job, then those people need to be in the office. But I've actually found that a lot of males prefer to go into the office, because from some of the guys I've spoken to and asked them, why are you in the office every day? They've said because they don't trust themselves working from home.
Oh,
So they find that their mind wanders, and that these are the few guys that I had spoken to, and they said that they're not more productive working from home. They find that when they're in the office, they're more productive. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. I found that very interesting, especially a lot of the engineers that I had spoken to, because I noticed amongst the engineers, a lot of them were going into the office. But then you find that there are a handful that like to work from home and they still get their job done. So,
and I think it's just making sure the options available for people.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially for those who've got caring responsibilities, whether that's for elderly parents or with children or,
Children.
yeah, things like that, that they have got the option that they can work from home if they need to as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So with your perspective with the recruitment, because what I'd really love to touch on is like your own experience that you shared about how moving from South Africa and then you're highly qualified and you've got a master's degree, and then having to actually remove those qualifications to be able to even get a foot in the door. Is this something that you're seeing is quite common, and particularly with those who've come from different countries to Australia, where they're having to actually alter their resumes and kind of underselling themselves and undervaluing what skills they actually have and what they're bringing to the table just so they can get that foot in the door?
Yes, absolutely. I find that is happening even today. I mean, that happened to me 10 years ago. And a recruitment agency I had gone to, the owner of that recruitment agency actually told me to take my qualifications off my resume, because he said, being in the industry for such a long time, he knows what companies are looking for, especially in WA. There's this thing of WA experience. And if you don't have WA experience, you cannot get in anywhere, which is really sad, because I mean, me, for instance, I worked, as I said, in a bank, but also I owned a business. So because my business didn't conflict with my work at the bank, I was able to do both. And having that knowledge and experience and I worked 22 years in one company. So I had years of experience and knowledge that I could impart, but coming into Australia, it was just like, no, you don't have WA experience, or you overqualified, which made it really, really difficult. And I'm currently on a South Africans in Perth page, where people are still having those problems today. People are coming in with heaps of experience and degrees, and you can't get a job. You've got to try and start at the bottom and work your way up to the top. Yeah, so it still happens today, which is really, really sad, because, people coming in they wouldn't be accepted in the country if they didn't have what was needed to come into the country, because you have to have a degree or a trade to be able to come into Australia, So yeah, it's just sad that that's overlooked. And, there's this small minded thinking of, you've got to have WA experience, which, nah, for me doesn't work really.
Well, it's a very rigid way of thinking, because it's actually not being open to explore different opportunities as well, to be able to tap into markets that are available to you. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I've been approached by a number of different migrants from different backgrounds, where very similar experience to yourself, where they've had lots of qualifications, master's degree in different things, whether it's engineering or architecture, project managers with 30 years experience, and can't get a job. And that's why I'm just, for me, it's like, what is the disconnect that's happening here, that from your experience, you could see where we could help bridge that gap?
I found, if you get an Uber, for instance, majority of those Uber drivers are well educated, experienced guys that are in the country and cannot find a job, and they're doing Uber, they're driving Uber because they've got Saudi Arabia experience. They don't have WA experience or Australian experience. And I think, having somebody come from Saudi Arabia, for instance, he's an engineer, he's worked in oil and gas, he's got all of that experience. We're looking for an engineer here in oil and gas. His experience can help us here in this country, but they won't take him because he doesn't have Australian experience. And that's where I feel there's a disconnect, where companies need to start looking more broadly and start looking at people from other countries, the experience they've had, the projects that they've worked on, which is multi-billion-dollar projects. Here our projects are much smaller in comparison to projects in Saudi Arabia, for instance, in oil and gas. That's just one example. So why not take that person and let him impart his knowledge and expertise of how things were done there that could help us benefit and grow in that industry here. So I think it's just changing mindset and being able to be more open, bringing in people from different parts of the world. And, that can actually help the industries grow.
And it's part of that diversity, isn't it? Like diversity
Absolutely.
isn't just about women. Diversity is about everything.
All
like
cultures.
people come, from all cultures, and people come from different walks of lives and different experiences. And that's where, if you can actually harness that and learn from it as well, because you might actually learn something that's going to help the company, the business, the project, whatever it is, to be able to do something better and more efficient.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What I'd love to hear as well, if you've got any, that's a great example that you've shared. Have you got any kind of standout recruitment moments that you've had that's kind of like one that's always sort of stuck in your head, and what that might be?
I actually have two.
Two.
So,
Great.
I called, I was recruiting, I think it was Boilermakers, and I had been calling a number of candidates, that had applied to roles. And this one candidate stuck with me up until today. He's still, I think of him all the time. When I called him, I interviewed him, I sent his resume to site, and he was approved, came back, and I called him and offered him the role. And, he told me that my phone call saved his life.
Wow.
When I talk about it, I still get weepy and goosebumps, because he said to me, Prudence, I was on the verge of committing suicide. I could not find a job. I thought there's something wrong with me. I've applied to so many companies, and I thought I've been blacklisted. I don't know, what caused, why I'm not finding work. But you are my lifesaver. You've saved my life from committing suicide. He said, because that's what my next plan was. And, that stuck with me, because in recruitment, we can change people's lives for the good or worse, and it's just about the way we speak to candidates, the way we treat people, it can make a huge difference in a person's life. And, that guy will still message me from time to time. Hello, Prudence, how are you? And he stayed on that project until the end. But it's just those connections that you build, and you don't realize that, you can change someone's life. And he actually said, you've changed my life for the better. Thank you. And he just could not stop thanking. He actually sent flowers and stuff to work. Once he had started and he was working, he sent me a bouquet of flowers and some chocolates to say thank you. And that for me is like, I don't want anything from anybody. It's just if I can help make someone's life better, that's all that matters to me, you know. And the other one was this one candidate, one of the superintendents refused to have him on site. And he was, he was experienced. He had had years of experience in the industry, and I couldn't understand why. But this superintendent, he just lost it when he saw this guy's name on the spreadsheet, and he didn't want him on site. And then my manager came back to me and she said, oh, what was the process you did with this candidate, because he's not wanted on site? And so I dug deeper. I called the candidate and I said, have you ever worked with any of these superintendents? I gave him a few names, not just the one name that didn't want him. And he said, oh yes, I worked with this one guy. And it turns out that this guy was taking bribes from candidates many, many years ago. And this candidate found out and reported him. So because of that, he didn't want to work with him. So I went back and I told my manager, and it went right up to the construction manager. And he said, no, let the guy come to site. He doesn't have to work in his team. He can work in someone else's team. And you know what? He was one of the last candidates on site because I fought for him. I thought, no, I'm not going to let what happened many years ago jeopardize this guy's career going forward. So yeah, that's also something that I take pride in, that I will fight for my candidates if it's right to fight for them.
And those stories are just incredible. And it's, like the people that you are changing their lives. Like you've saved that guy purely from one phone call, and, being able to help the second one get a job, even though there's a bit of a power play there with the superintendent saying no. And, that can really destroy someone, especially if they don't know what's going on. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that happens a lot in our industry. It really happens a lot.
yeah, well, it does come down to your reputation, doesn't it? So what I'd like to know is you've got lots of experience in this space, and you've obviously, as we've spoken about, recruited everyone from the blue collars all the way to the white collars. For people who are doing recruitment, to be able to bring that heart and that care and that empathy that you so beautifully have explained, what do you think they could actually do to show that they actually care about the candidates? Because there's a lot of instances where people are submitting job applications and they just don't hear anything. They think they've got 90% of everything that's needed. They're a good candidate. They don't hear back, they don't get feedback, or they have an interview and they don't hear back. And then, it might be a month later, they get a letter to say, look, you've been unsuccessful. What kind of approach could recruiters actually have to help make the process a lot smoother for the candidates, recognizing that this is people's lives that you're dealing with here?
I think it's about, when a recruiter starts in a company, it's about sitting down and mentoring them, and they need to have recruiters who've been in the industry longer to be able, in companies, if for instance, I'm in a company and I've been with that company for over 10 years and a new recruiter comes in, it's about getting me to sit with that person and talk them through it, and of how you recruit and how you treat people. Because the most recruiting, if you think about it, it's about people. It's about treating people with respect and getting back to somebody as respecting them. Yes, there are times where even myself, I haven't got back to a candidate, but that's not because I didn't want to. It's because of the volumes that you're working with, so, and sometimes you do miss somebody, not having, but I try my best to always pick up that phone, not to send an email, but to pick up the phone and say, look, unfortunately, your application has been unsuccessful on this occasion. But that going forward, we'll keep your details on file, and going forward, we will be in contact with you, if anything else comes up that suits your skills and experience. So it's about, I think candidates like to hear a voice no matter what, they even me, I don't like to just get an email to say, oh, sorry, I worked for a company now, just recently before Christmas, I was helping out at one of a company I worked for before, but in the rail division. And I called a candidate to say, unfortunately, you've been unsuccessful. And unbeknown to me, there were other members in the team that were sitting, not in the recruitment team, but in the company, was sitting not far from me. One of the ladies got up and she came to me and she said, I've not heard any recruiter working here call a candidate and say, unfortunately, you've been unsuccessful. She said, I take my hat off to you for doing that, because it's not nice just not hearing from companies, where they just ghost you and they don't come back to you and tell you whether you've been unsuccessful and why you've been unsuccessful. 90% of the time, we cannot give reasons. So we just say you've been unsuccessful because there's various stages in the recruitment process that you need to get through. But there are different reasons why people are not successful. And I think it's just about teaching the younger generation to have heart, and that there's somebody else's life on the other end of that call, So, just pick up the phone and talk to them and say, you've been unsuccessful, and give them reason. You don't have to give them a reason why, just say, that your application was unsuccessful. So I think it's just about teaching the younger generation to be more engaged with their candidate. And, I've been recruiting for such a long time that a lot of candidates know my name, So even when we were in Darwin and we went to site for the last year of that project, a lot of the guys that I recruited shook my hand, because they said it's nice to put a name to a face, because they'd never met me. I've just spoken to them over the telephone. So it's just having that connection with your candidates makes a huge difference. And in doing that, you will never be short of being able to fill your roles. It's not just about numbers, putting bums on seats. It's about having those connections with the guys that no matter what company I go to, the minute they hear I'm at that company, they're contacting me, whether it be through LinkedIn, if they've got my mobile number, or email, they contact me to say, if you've got any work, please keep me in mind. So it's about having those connections, building those relationships that will go with you no matter where you are.
Absolutely. And the big part is like with this, because it's a very I'm trying to think of the word myself now, but it's very like it's not
transactional.
Transactional, thank you. That was the word I was thinking of. It is very transactional, but it's also like a lot of the roles that you're recruiting for as well. Like they're not long term, they're short term roles and contract work and project work that, especially in construction, once it's constructed, like, it may move into an operations and maintenance role then, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same people will stay on, that there's a new team that comes on. So then you've actually got those gaps and people move from project to project. So it is about, being able to, I guess it's like the way that I would liken it, it's the same as a business. Like a business has a database, and like if you're a recruiter and you have a database of candidates, for example, when you're actually moving around, then you can go, okay, I'm on this project and I need these people. Who do I know in my database that I could actually contact to say, are you available? Because it's normally high pressure, high stakes right at the beginning. You've got to get this many people by this time and, go, 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 go. And you're scrambling to find everyone. So, I would liken it to, like a company database essentially in recruitment. So,
the thing is, as a recruiter, you are the first face and voice to that company. So if you do a good job with those candidates, they are going to stay with that company forever. I mean, I recruited people in this company I worked for that I started at in 2010, from 2012 on Jimble Bar, that went from project to project with me. And that's what it's about. It's about getting those good candidates and keeping them and taking them from project to project, because then you're never going to be short of candidates. You're always going to fill those roles with good candidates because of the way you treated them initially.
The respect that you said, like if you're respecting people, then those people are going to respect you and stay with you as well. So
absolutely, absolutely. And that's, I think, where a lot of recruiters fall short, is because, when you're sitting in a team and you hear the way some of the recruiters speak about their candidates, it's just not on, and I've had to stand up a few times, and that's why one of the organizations I worked for, I wasn't the most popular because I always stood up for the candidate and said, you know what, that is somebody's life, that's somebody's parent or child. Do not speak like that about them. It's not the right thing to do, so I was always, kind of thing, oh, it's Prue again. But no, you treat people with respect no matter who they are.
Well, exactly. And it's always like, would you like to be treated like that? That's how I kind of frame it, is that if you don't want to be treated like that, don't treat others like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've already shared a bit already, which is awesome with your incredible experience that you've got. But for like younger recruiters coming in, what sort of, like other than the respect and that understanding that it is someone's life that you're dealing with, what kind of skills and qualities do you think that they need to be able to have a career long term in HR and recruitment?
As a recruiter, I think firstly, you've got to be resilient. You've got to, know the organization you're working for to be able to bring in those good candidates, and know the roles you're recruiting for. Yeah, I think there should be some kind of training to train the younger recruiters coming in on how to deal with people, because it is dealing with people at the end of the day. It's how to speak to candidates, how to negotiate, how to build those relationships with the hiring managers, for instance. So it's and a lot of them come in and they think that just by being flashy and wearing the shortest skirts and those kind of things, you're going to climb the ladder. And a lot of the younger recruiters, I think, they don't they just come in because of their looks. They come in not because they can actually do the job, but because somebody liked their look and put them into that position. And that's what it is happening today. I mean, there was something I saw on LinkedIn where all the recruiters were all young blonde girls, and is that the kind of look all the companies are going for now? What about us that are the older generation that can teach them? Like, I mean, one of the big companies has just contacted me and offered me a role with them. They're wanting me to mentor the younger recruiters, but there's 40 of them in one team. And I actually turned it down because I know that they are not going to take my experience and then what I'm trying to instill and teach them. They're not going to take it lightly, because all they're wanting to do is climb the ladder. So they're going to do no matter what they have to do to get to climb that ladder. And by me trying to teach them, the good way of recruiting and how to do it properly, it won't work. So I actually turned it down because I had been in that situation where I actually ended up being bullied because, they didn't like the way I worked and they preferred to do things their way. And so I thought, nah, I turned it down. I'm not going to go through that again. As much as they need the coaching, they need those courses to be able to, to teach them how to recruit, how to be a good recruiter. It's nothing out there anymore.
So is that something that it's a company responsibility or is it an industry responsibility?
I think it's both company and industry, but mainly I think companies should start looking at that. Recruitment agencies, the big organizations that are employing recruiters, because every company needs recruiters. You need to bring those people in, because without somebody bringing those people in, who's going to complete the jobs?
Yeah, that's it.
So, you've got to have those experienced recruiters, because then you find that the recruiters come in, they're not sure of what needs to be done. They get thrown in the deep end. And then they just like, okay, you need to recruit these roles. And without any experience, without any teaching or knowledge of the industry. So they need to have knowledge of the industry that they're going into to be able to recruit the right candidates for those roles.
So it sounds like there's an opportunity to have like a proper structure and framework and, like a lot of education about what does good recruitment look like.
That's a big gap. Absolutely.
There
That
might be a calling there for you, Prue.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, to have someone with your heart who's done it so well and, like you touched on, even to be able to help save someone's life, like that's a big thing that, if people did actually understand the good ways of recruiting and how it can actually, like you said, how it could make or break someone as well. You're dealing with a person's life here. But if it can actually be the difference to what stops someone from walking down that route where now they're actually got a job and they've got purpose and, they feel like they're being valued again, what a bonus that is. So,
Yeah. Because even that major project I recruited for, after I'd done all the recruitment, at the end I was on site. They asked me to help with the demobbing of some of the candidates. And when I went into those meetings with the guys and they saw it was me, there was no fuss or fight because they were like, oh yeah, Prue, we know next project. And I said to them, we are going to have more projects. Next project, we'll be in contact with you again. And
yeah,
so don't take this, because when a project comes to an end and people start being demobbed, it affects them because they're thinking, oh God, where am I going to get my next salary from? Where am I going to how am I going to feed my family, if there's no work? But I recruited them and I'm demobbing them. They were happy with that, because they knew that, oh, Prudence, yeah, you told us next, if there's more projects, you'll be in contact with us. And I keep to my word. So they knew that, yeah, it's okay for now. Take a break, have this time off, and then we'll be in contact with you for the next project. So,
yeah.
they didn't take it that badly.
Yeah. Now, one thing that you touched on before, and that's great because to me, that's like it's not only about the individual's reputation, but it's your reputation as a recruiter as well, so that people respect you and value you and trust in you. But one thing I'd really love to hear more about is that resilience piece, because I can imagine it is not an easy space, especially, if you're picking up the phone and you've got lots of unsuccessful phone calls to make. What kind of tips do you have with your experience to help someone maintain their resilience in this space?
Yeah, it's really tough. It really is, being a recruiter in some instances, because you have candidates that are going to swear you when you tell them. Unfortunately, I've had a candidate who swore me because I told him he was unsuccessful. But it's about not taking things personally and
Mm.
realizing that, what, everybody has a bad day. Everything could have just been going wrong for him on that particular day. And him taking it out on me is just one way of him, getting it out. So don't take things personally. It's about, when you're resilient, it's about, making sure that, you empathize with the candidate, just not to take things to heart. Because then if you that kind of, yes, I have a good heart, I'm empathetic towards people, I care about people, but when the tables have turned and people are nasty to you, it's about just saying, you know what, talk about it to somebody, speak about it to your manager or whoever. If get it out of, so you don't keep it within yourself and start thinking, oh, is there something wrong with me? Why is this candidate swearing me? It's not about that. It's just about them having a bad day, and try not to take it personally.
Yeah, and that's so important because sometimes we take on other people's stuff, but we've got to realize that it's their stuff, it's not ours. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, awesome. I love it. So, in closing, is there any comments or statements or parting words that if you've always had a thought that it's like, if I could just share this one thing, if I could just share this one thing and get it out and let as many people know as possible, what would that be?
Just
Um,
be kind to one another, no matter what the situation is. Think before you speak. Just think, take 2 seconds or 5 seconds before you open your mouth and utter something to somebody, especially if you angry or if somebody's put you in a bad mood. Don't take it out on other people. Just try and, calm yourself and just be kind, because being nasty is not nice, and there's sometimes, people, especially guys, even on site, they think they're joking when they say nasty things to other people. And it's about I read something the other day, or watched a video on this one guy who was depressed, and he was off work for a little while, and then he came back to work, and his teammate, the one in particular, kept teasing him and calling him mad Mac or sad sack or something like that. And one day he bumped into this man's wife in town, and she looked at him and she said, "Oh, you are the nasty man." And he said that stuck with him and he couldn't understand why. And then he went back to work and he spoke to the guy that he'd been teasing, and he said, "Oh, do you take offense to me teasing you and calling you sad?" And he said, "Yes, because I'm suffering from depression." He says, "There's mornings I don't want to get out of bed, but I have to push myself because I've got a family to feed. So I have to force myself to go to work." And then come to work, and then you bullying me. That's a form of bullying. You keep calling me names and all of these kind of things when I'm going through depression. And he said that stuck with him. And he's just learned that, you know what? Just be kind no matter what. Everybody is going through something. So by you just listening and thinking before you speak can make a huge difference in somebody's life. So yeah, it's
Absolutely.
just think before you talk.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's a big thing. And that's exactly what I say as well. Just always be kind because you never know the silent battles that someone's dealing with. So
Exactly. Because I mean, you say something to somebody that could just push them off the edge.
yeah.
That could be something that would send that person, to commit suicide or do whatever they've been thinking of doing, by just one nasty word. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just think about other people. Yeah, that's all. I just want to sometimes shake some people and say, you know what? Think about somebody and be kind, because being nasty is just I don't know, some people it's just ingrained in them to be like that, but it's not nice. Yeah.
And I think as well as that some people, they actually, like the example that you've just given, they actually don't realize that what they're doing is actually upsetting someone else because they've not been called out for it. And it was only when that man's wife called him out for it that he actually got to thinking about it. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They just think, oh, it's a joke. I'm joking,
yeah,
but not realizing that that person doesn't think it's a joke.
yeah.
So that's why I say think before you speak.
Absolutely. Such valuable information and words of wisdom. So thank you for
Thank
sharing that.
you.
We're both like-minded in that regard. So
Absolutely.
I love it.
I think we've been through enough having
Oh,
worked on these sites, to realize, what, it doesn't pay to be ugly to anybody, no matter what. I'm always trying to help people that have been on the receiving end of that ugliness, and try and help them to, realize that it's not about them, it's about that other person.
and I think that's the difference, isn't it? Like because you and I have both had that exposure to site and the difficulties and done the fly in, fly out as well and
Yeah.
seen what that's like and the issues of like it's actually quite accentuated a lot more in those environments when people are remote and they're away from their families and their
Families.
loved ones and their support networks and it's a whole nother beast that people don't understand unless they've actually lived it and breathed it and experienced it.
Exactly. And I mean, like even with a lot of wives that I know that husbands work FIFO, and including my daughters, I always used to say to them, because they say, oh, the husbands come back and they don't want to do anything. And, they just sit in their rooms all night and they do nothing there after work. And I had to say to them, do you know, having done FIFO myself, how lonely that is.
Yeah.
You at home, you with the kids, yes, it's difficult, but you've got the connections, you have the parties, you've got you've got the family birthdays and functions, whereas that person is missing out on all of that, and they're doing it for your benefit and for the family. I don't think any man wants to keep working FIFO year in and year out and missing, birthdays and anniversaries and all those important milestones in their children's lives, and sports and all of that kind of thing. It's difficult, but you need to understand that, yes, give him a day or two, let him get his bearings, and then, he's back to being a dad and a husband. But being out there is lonely, so I always say that to my daughters. You need to understand that, there are definitely two sides. It's not, I mean, sometimes, yes, the men go and they drink, which, they're there to make money, but they go and they drink the money, and that is another beast on its own.
Yeah.
But, those that, go into their rooms and they sit in their rooms and they watch TV, you need to be mindful that they also battling, that depression, being away, the mental battles that they go through.
Yeah. And it's, to be able to do that after being on site, and us having both lived it, but being on site and, you're doing your 10 and your 12-hour days, and it's quite intense and full on, and you don't get a lunch break because you're non-stop for that whole time. Like there's no going for a walk at lunch or going down the road for a coffee or anything. None of that stuff happens. It is
Absolutely.
150% all day, every day. And we were on a 4 week on, 1 week off roster, and it just doesn't stop. So the only way you can actually get the mind to stop and the body to stop is actually just to sit there and like do nothing for a little bit before you go to bed and get up and do it all again tomorrow.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And I mean, I always even say to them, like to my own kids as well, at 7 o'clock is my brain dead time.
Yeah,
It's don't come and try and talk to me, because that's my downtime. I want to now wind down from the day I've had, because sometimes it's just full on. It's
yeah,
work, it's children, and then once the kids go to bed, then that's your time to just, like you have your time, they have their time. But instead
yeah,
of you working 8 hours, they're working 12-hour days,
yeah,
so it's like that time. But they also miss their families, they miss their children. You have your kids here, you can have those conversations with your kids at night, and you can read stories, you have laughs together, whereas they don't have that. So it's just about being kind and realizing that he's missing out, but he's doing it for your benefit and for the children, so that you can have the finer things in life. So it's a balance that, I think is also something that we need to talk more about,
yeah.
especially in this industry where, that needs to be brought up more, for the wives to understand, those that have never worked FIFO like we have.
Yeah, yeah. I think that'll be another interview, Prue, like to talk about
Yeah,
what FIFO like as a woman is actually really like.
yeah,
So,
absolutely. It's not
yeah,
easy. It's
yeah.
hard.
Because
Yeah.
we're a rare breed, like us female women who've done the FIFO life, we are a rare breed. So,
Yeah.
but no, such a awesome conversation, and really grateful to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of the value and wisdom that you've got. Like you are incredible, and
Oh,
I
thanks,
hope
Ange.
this conversation is of value for someone else, and they've learnt some awesome tips along the way. So
Oh,
thank you so
thank
much,
you.
Prue.
Thank you, Ange. Thank you so much for having me, and all the best with everything that's going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, see you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I hope this conversation gave you something that you can take with you, whether it be a little bit of insight, inspiration, or maybe just a reminder that you're not alone. If it resonated with you, please share, because we're better when we help build each other up. And remember that your experience, your story, and your journey, it all matters more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay connected, and never forget you are epic.